It all starts out, of course, with the Space Shuttle main engines firing. The sparkers turn on. The engines are getting ready to spool up. And there's an amazing process that comes into play when everything turns on here, right? You guys there's 170 cameras or so around the vehicle, and there's an enormous integrated network or process that's taking place. Why don't you guys talk about that a little bit?
That's a fact, Matt. This particular view happens to be a 16 millimeter photosonic camera. It's running at 400 frames per second. It's got a 200-foot film load, which gives it an approximate runtime of about 22 seconds. There's a lot going on in the imagery that you're seeing, but in the photo world, there's a lot going on the launch pad right now. We have 22 MLP cameras, mobile launcher platform cameras, in and around looking at various elements of the vehicle and the structure. We have 9 cameras on the fixed service structure doing much the same thing, and then we have a number of other cameras around the perimeter doing the same thing. It's all built in concentric rings. So this is controlled primarily by a system called Photo Optical Control System that sequences all of these camera starts, primarily the ones inside the fence, inside the perimeter fence around the pad. And then we have multiple tracking sites that you'll see imagery of later, as far as, Kenny, 75 miles away, imaging different elements as well.
Ken, right about here, you're out in the field a couple of miles away sitting on a turret somewhere, but your heart's starting to beat a little bit now because you see the steam coming up over the horizon, and you're waiting to look for a vehicle that's coming off the pad, right?
This is where it gets exciting right here. At this point, when you're sitting on a tracker miles away, this takes forever. It's almost like you're watching this film in your head because you're ready to go. You want this thing to fly. You're holding the joystick. You're wanting to lift off the ground, and it's not moving. It's lit.
Yeah.
There is steam. There's smoke.
Yeah, there's an enormous cloud of steam coming up, right?
And it's not moving yet. It's still sitting there. It's an amazing few seconds of time when you're sitting there. And if you watch some of the tracks, you'll see the operators actually go up and come back down and wait, because you really get the sense that it's lit, it's going somewhere. But shuttle's one of the few things that lights and sits there for a few seconds before the solids ignite and it actually starts moving. The anticipation of what's about to happen, what you're about to hear, the sound waves hitting your chest, everything is just, it's awesome right here. This is all brought on by weeks and weeks and weeks of setup and planning, that what you see is just the final product. You really can't understand or fathom what goes into getting this what we do.
We go through a lot of preparation to get to launch day. It takes about, from start to launch day, is about a 6-week process of servicing equipment and doing our procedure checks and deploying all the assets. Launch day is actually, it has kind of a party atmosphere. You kind of breathe a sigh of relief that, okay, we're here.
It's very hard to imagine the extensive network of cameras that you guys have. There's all of this complexity, and the more complex a system gets, the more prone it is to having failures or breakdowns. You guys have had an absolutely stunning success rate during your history, and it's a testimony to the quality of the team and the individuals that work for it.
That's a good point, and I have to tell you, one of the things that attracted me to this job 20 years ago was the quality that has always been here in what we do, and it's only gotten better over time. Keep in mind that a film camera is an electromechanical moving device, and these particular cameras that we use, the photosonic models, are Cadillacs in that industry, but they are still electromechanical moving devices that are prone to failure. Our success rate has always been in the upper 90th percentile, but since return to flight, we have been in the 98, 99, and in some launches 100% successful. And that's no accident. Even though the equipment I would consider to be Cadillac in the industry, it's due to the dedication and the work ethic of the people here in this small organization that has given NASA all of this great imagery for a very long time, very consistently.
26 people work directly together in the photo, but obviously we have support. The timing that you see is a separate group. They're just responsible for timing. They make sure that all of our signals to us are good, the right levels. We have generator people that on our outlying sites where we have trackers, they provide a generator. Timing, there's no cables. We have GPS antennas, but those systems have to be tested that they're right on time with all the rest of the cameras, because it's real critical that each item has the same timing on it. So if they're looking for a specific event, every single film item is on the same time. So we have a lot of people that support us, but our direct group right here is 26 people.
One of the things I want to point out real quick is in this view that we're looking at right here, you can see on the right-hand side one of our camera enclosures. That is a half-inch steel box surrounding another half-inch thick aluminum box. The pressures impacted on that location, and here you see it on the left side, are phenomenal. There's 2 levels of nitrogen purge going into the internal enclosure. One's at about 7 psi to create an ambient atmosphere, non-explosive atmosphere, and another one's at 750 psi that will be directed across the face of the port to blow away any debris. But because we put dry nitrogen purge inside that box, that film that we load in that camera can only stay in that environment for so long. It will actually dry out and crack. We put sponges in the enclosure to add a little moisture back, but we only have about a 3 or 4 day window before we know from history that dry nitrogen will impact that film. So if they scrub launch for whatever reason, we have to find a window where we can get back out, open up those boxes, and replenish the water in those sponges. Otherwise, we know that film's going to break on start.
This is one of the on-pad camera enclosures showing this
Right.
view. But you guys also install cameras, and you have to climb up that ladder. Is
Right,
that correct?
That's exactly right. That ladder that you see there in that structure, at the top of that ladder is a door, and inside that door is this camera. We're looking to make sure everything disconnected like it was supposed to. We're making sure the door closes. We're looking at, not me, the engineers, flame blow by. They're looking at all that. There's a lot going on here that's of interest to the engineers.
Yeah, and look at that door rattle around.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's there's a whole lot of shaking going on outside as that vehicle clears the pad. The height of those tail service masts, which holds these umbilicals, is probably what?
35 feet maybe.
Yeah, it's
from
up
base
there.
to top.
It's up there.
Yeah.
It's very big when you stand
It's a
next to it.
huge structure.
They have these this camera and this lighting system inside. They want to make sure they know what's going on with the umbilical disconnect. And so you guys are responsible for both the lighting and the cameras inside.
We are, and a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought up the lights. The lights that you see there illuminating the scene have been transitioned to LEDs. I'm not sure if they were LEDs in that former view, but prior to that transition, they were incandescent bulbs, and the G loading from launch almost 100% of the time blew those lamps before we ended our film run, and it became quite an issue around return to flight. And we did a lot of work. Engineering came in and helped us, and we solved the problem, and we've got a system that now is real reliable.
Do you guys have a sense for how many feet of film we go through on any given launch on a rough basis?
I couldn't give you a final number. I'd be guessing, but it's probably in the order of, because they use 1,000-foot loads on the 35 tracking items.
Right, and there's 15 trackers, so that right there is 15,000 feet of 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
I want to say it's somewhere in the order of 20,000 feet.
Wow.
And I'm off a little bit there, but it's in that neighborhood.
Yeah, so that's an enormous amount of film. Right after the launch and everybody shuts their cameras down, what occurs with the team as a whole? What do they do?
Well, I can start first because on the tracking items, when you're sitting on the tracker, the camera is within 2 feet of your head.
Yeah.
So immediately after launch, you download your film out of the camera, whether it be a 70 millimeter or a 35, where you just take the magazine, and you start your trek back to a rendezvous point where we have a film downloader that will ready it for shipment. The pad stuff, which Tim is the lead for the pad stuff, is a little bit more difficult because they have to safe the pad before we can get in there.
Well, that's true. Ken's exactly right. We work as teams. The pad is divided up into sections, and we have basically 4 teams or groups. And my job is to work with the safety office and the NASA test director at the assembly point to send those crews out as the areas are safed by the safing team as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible as well. We generally get the perimeter items first. We work from outside in, and then we will work up the FSS, the fixed service structure, and then the MLP, mobile launcher platform. And the last items we get are camera sites 1 and 6 that are near the LO2 and the LH2 fuel farms. It takes about, I would say, an average shuttle, it takes about 5 hours to pull every film item down.
To take you back a few years, we used to process all of our own film right here in the building we're sitting in.
Right.
So the turnaround time was very minimal. It didn't take long. We could process it, print it, and get it right over to image analysis so the engineers could start their analysis of the flight. So now we have to fly our film to Atlanta to a processing company up there, which takes a little bit of time. That's where the HD video came in. The engineers needed something to look at immediately after flight. When I say immediately, within 20 minutes, they're looking at our HD video. It takes about 24 hours, and this is an amazing thing, for all of our film in 2 flights usually to be flown to Atlanta, to be processed, scanned into HD, and flown back to get to the image and analysis people in the VAB to start looking at it. In the meantime, they're looking at all of the HD footage. It's not as high resolution as the film, so if they see something in the HD, there's a mirror image in film, and they'll go to that film item and then bring that up at the same amount of time. You can see the timing on the film.
Right, the time code grounds everything to the same.
That's how they find
baseline.
Where they want to look at, and they can compare the HD item. Okay, we saw something we want to look at closer. They go to the film item. But all of that film turnaround, again, 24 hours for us to retrieve it, for us to offload it into canisters, to fly it, to process it, to scan it, fly it back, and get it to them. That's an amazing feat.
There's actually 2 film review processes that take place after the launch and after the films start to come back, and one of them occurs with your group where you guys are reviewing it from a quality assurance standpoint, and then the other group, which is reviewing the film, is reviewing it from an engineering standpoint to look at the vehicle and the health of the vehicle and what has occurred during Ascent. So your group sits down and looks at it and critiques it from a quality assurance standpoint, correct?
That's a fact, and in as much as we are proud of our success rate, we are constantly looking at the potential for issues. I as instrumentation lead, I'm the first line of defense with a camera issue. So I may be looking at things when I do film review. That timing display on the right, are all the digits accurate? Have they dropped any segments? Is the frame line clean? Do I have any technical issues with the film? Is exposure right? Do I have a mechanical tick mark that's a tear in the film anywhere? This is a lot of film moving through large mechanical devices when we're imaging, but also when we process. And there can be technical issues there. There can be film processing issues, color timing, as Ken pointed out before. The accuracy of that color, is it real? We're not Hollywood. We don't care if it's visually stunning for visually stunning's sake. We want accurate representation of what's going on here, and we want to see as much detail as possible in that imagery.
So, and just to give the listeners sort of a sense of the room that you're in, it's kind of a little miniature movie theater, very small,
exactly.
Very cozy. Has 25, 30 seats in it, something like that, and slanted up just like in a movie theater, so nobody's head is in the way of the guy behind them.
It is a projection room where before we had HD scans, we actually ran projectors, which we didn't get to see a lot of our film because of how difficult it was to show it. And also, when you run film through projectors, you could damage it. You could burn it if you stop at the still frame. You could burn up frames, and so we didn't get to see a lot of our film back in the early days. Now that everything's scanned to HD, we get an immediate copy of all of it, which is great because we get to see things that we haven't seen. Even though we've been shooting this for years, a lot of this stuff we've never seen before. And with the advent of HD scanners and all, it's a lot better for us.
Ken makes a good point. That ability to look at it as quickly as possible has dramatically increased our quality because if you can't see it, you don't know it's a problem, you can't fix it. And it's given us that tool to increase our quality and to fix problems before they become a bigger problem.
Right. And
Well,
and the engineering community, when they're looking at this, they're not looking for camera problems. They're looking for, orbiter issues.
Right,
So,
right.
so a lot of times we never heard that there was a hair in the frame, or that the timing, one of the segments were out, or stuff like that. So we didn't know that camera may be lubed and cleaned and put right back into service, not knowing that there was an issue. Now that we see those things, we take out the little tiny problems that are
Right.
not major problems, but they bug us. We see it, it's like, wow, that shouldn't be there.
Obviously, during the film review process, some of the things that go wrong are mechanical or setup problems that can happen. But oftentimes, with the manual tracking, of course, you have the human sort of component to it all. You guys effectively are operating a joystick, and in some matter of speaking, you're playing a real-time video game. You're tracking this vehicle with a joystick through a scope, and there's a lot of excitement. Your heart's beating, a lot of pressure to keep on target with this thing, and it's like looking at a little point of light pulling away at 3 Gs, going thousands of feet per second, and accelerating even faster. And if this thing falls out of frame, it's really hard to get it back in. And so I suppose that some of these film reviews, when you guys quite aren't on your game on a particular launch and maybe lose frame, that there's a little ribbing that goes on perhaps in the review team.
It's extremely fraternal. It's all good natured, and there is some hilarity to it, but it's all very serious. We take our job very seriously, and we're always constantly trying to improve.
When we put in a film and we start to play it, the first thing that comes up is, oh, this is UCS 15. Kenny, this is your track, and so everybody in there looks, and you'll either get a good job, great track, or, hey, come on, put it back, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yeah.
And so it's critiqued, but it's critiqued in a fun way, and you definitely learn from it. One thing that we notice is the position of the cameras, the bore sighting that's on the mounts, because that's we have more than one camera on every tracker. Matter of fact, we have multiple cameras on every tracker, and they all got to be looking at the same thing. It's not an easy task, but that part is critiqued. Again, exposure. We look at the different exposures because the sun angle from all of our different sites is a different angle. Some might be looking into the sun, some might be backlit. So we also talk about exposure. What did you use? What exposure did you use? And by years and years of experience, we've got it down to where we can pretty much pick exposure just by the time of day. We know what it's going to be.
You brought up bore sight on those trackers, and I think Kenny kind of downplays it a little bit. His group takes care of that. I'm in awe of their ability to do what they do with these long systems. These lenses, these 400-inch lenses that we use at our long-range tracking sites, are typically used in a fixed position, fixed sight, because they are so long and so difficult to bore sight. And Kenny's crew has developed the tools and techniques on their own. They really invented and to my knowledge, they're the only group anywhere that has been able to take those long systems, put them on a KTM tracker, bore sight them to the guide scope, and make them accurate all the way out to the horizon. It's just phenomenal.
Well, let's talk about that, Ken. The tracker itself, of course, has several platens on it that sits on either side of the operator. The operator sort of sits in the middle with their control panel in front of them. And then you've got these platens in which you can attach various lenses and cameras, correct?
That's correct. And what comes into play is the parallax. You sit in the center of the tracker. 3 feet from each side are the platforms. So that makes the cameras 6 feet apart. Trying to point those cameras to a specific point in space that they're looking at the same thing is very difficult. Each film item has a different portion of the orbiter that they're responsible for tracking. South Beach tracker is they have to track the engine sections. It has to be centered in the frame. UCS 8 tracker has to have the tip of the ET centered in the frame. UCS 15, where I track, I have to have the center of the orbiter in the frame. And so I know if I'm tracking that point and I'm watching the film, if that center of the orbiter is not in the film, if it's up to high or to the left, bore sight needs to be adjusted. Each one of our cameras has a specific point in time for an event that is going to occur at that time that camera is primed to capture. And each one is different. We have those times, we focus for those times, and I have to make sure that my bore sight is in bore sight at those times. It may be a little off on the pad because it's real close. It may be a little off at infinity, but during our point of interest, we have to make sure that our cameras are bore sighted perfect. You cannot bore sight on something close to you, because if it's close to you when you got the cameras bore sighted, as the image projection goes out, you're missing your target. It's going to be way left in one camera and way to the right in the other camera. Right. In Florida, our atmospherics are such that any ground targets that we can see, plus it's flat, there's no mountains, anything that we can see on ground level is usually so highly distorted that it literally looks like it's moving in the image.
Because of heat shimmer.
Because of the heat. So you really don't know, you're guessing almost. So what we do is we'll pick a ground target, maybe a tower, or the VAB is the largest building that we have around. Maybe it's a condominium down the beach, depending on what site we're at. And we'll pick a corner of the building or the top of the tower, or sometimes even a flashing light if we can see a light. And we'll get it close. We'll use that target and we'll look through the film camera, we'll look through the HD, and we'll get it real close. And then the only other thing that we have that can simulate a shuttle launch is a high-flying aircraft, a commercial aircraft. They're flying over constantly. And we go up and we get on an airplane and we track the airplane, and we're looking in dual monitors, and we'll say, hey, the HD is a little high and a little to the right in the frame. The film is right on. So we'll come back down to the ground target, we'll go to that, and we'll move the HD camera a little low and a little to the right, whatever we may need. Then we'll go back up to the airplane and we'll track the airplane. And we'll do this 15 times until we're tracking an airplane and the nose is exactly the same in each frame. The tracking operator is tracking the nose, and it's like, all right, we got it. We'll lock it down and we'll call that mount ready. This could be a week, 2 weeks prior to launch, but it's a heck of a process, very detailed, and I think, like Tim says, over the years we make it look easy, but if anybody was to come up and we tell them to bore sight that, I don't think they could do it.
They couldn't do it. And
I don't think they could.
What Kenny's talking about really is using tools. There's no video pickup on a film camera that you can just plug a BNC cable to and get that imagery. We developed here amongst ourselves. We sat around and we talked about how we were going to do this, and we took a bore sight tool that goes up on the film camera in place of the magazine, and we've put specialized cameras inside those tools so that it could see the film plane.
Oh, so it feeds a video signal back?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we did that here. Nobody taught us how to do that. We did it on our own, and there's no other way to do it.
Our little tools that we've developed make it a lot easier for us to do what we do, and again, it's one of the most difficult jobs.
How do you get someone proficient and into the flow of actually doing tracking? How do you train to be a tracker? They don't have tracking school. I mean, you guys are the tracking school. So how do you bring somebody in and do that?
We've set up several times when we've had an influx of people. We set up a tracker here in the facility at the hangar. We go through the tracker controls, how to power it up, how to turn on each axis, azimuth, elevation axis, stow pin removal, stow pin storage, brakes. Each one of these different functions can shut the mount off. If you have a brake on, you can't turn it on. If you have the stow pin out and it's not in the holder, you can't turn the mount on. So it's real confusing when someone new gets up in the seat and they can't get anything to work. But there's all these steps that they have to do prior to make sure it's safe to turn it on. Once we go through, how do you turn it on? How do you get it to move? What do you look for in balance and stuff like that? We'll go outside. We put the tracker either out on a tracking site, or we've done it here just out in the parking lot. And I mentioned earlier that part of our test setup, launch setup, is to track high-flying airplanes. That is the closest thing we can get to an actual launch. So we'll take the people out on site and we'll get them accustomed to tracking airplanes. One thing that does is it gives them the opportunity to acquire something on the fly, which we alluded that's one of the hardest things you can do, is see it in the air and then get it in your scope to track. And once it's in your scope, obviously it's in your cameras. We talked about critiquing film review. When we take new people out to track, we always put a video camera on board and we always record their track. And that's not to go back and laugh at them, it's to go back and so they can see progress. At first it's going to go zip, zip, in and out and on either side, up and down, and sometimes they don't even get on it at all. But then towards, when they get more proficient, obviously the airplane, hey, track the nose, and they go right up to the nose. Okay, track the tail. And our telescopes are such that when a high-flying aircraft goes over at 35,000 feet, we can look at different parts of the aircraft. I mean, it's not like it's a little speck in our view like you see from your eyes, but
so you can actually read the tail numbers.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's really impressive at 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the easy part. We put out trackers on ELV launches to where we don't have the requirements such as a shuttle where I have 15 trackers out. On ELV we may have 3 or 4 trackers,
Right.
which I take out of the hangar 2 or 3 extras,
Right.
for people to practice on a live launch. Something is a live launch is obviously different than an aircraft because aircraft is moving at a constant speed. A launch starts out very slow and can continue on to high velocity. Some of the launches, the smaller rockets, we used to liken it to it'd be easier to stand on Coke bottle boxes and at T0 kick the boxes out from under you, and that's how fast it goes up. But we don't do too many of those anymore. Most
Right.
of our stuff is fairly slow off the pad. Then once people get comfortable, there's always that fear factor when you get on a launch that, oh my gosh, after 23 years I still get it. It's butterflies, it's, just want to make sure you do everything right. There's a function in a launch that you don't get in an aircraft to where it goes up in elevation and then it almost, in reality, it stops moving in elevation and then it starts coming back down where it goes over the horizon. So you have to transition in your tracking that you're going up for a while and then you have to slow down, and actually stop in one axis and then start going back the other way. And it's just a skill that you have to practice. And I've never seen anybody get in the seat the first time, second. There's quite a learning process. But once you get it, you got it. Some get it better than others.
Well, and the further away you get from the pad, at some point it just disappears and you can't see the pad any longer.
That's a fact.
And so you have, as a tracker, you're guessing where this thing is. Now, of course, you're guessing based on years of experience.
Right.
We call what you're describing catching it on the fly, which is one of the more challenging jobs we do. I have done it from a couple of different sites, and I have to tell you, it is very unnerving to listen to the launch count, go to T0, and then you kind of hold your breath because you know it's coming. And in some locations, it's about 40 seconds from T0 to acquisition, and that is the most nerve-wracking 40 seconds of your life.
Because it's flying, but you don't know if you actually missed it or not, or
Right.
if you're looking in the right direction.
Now, is this because it's over the horizon?
It's because it's over the horizon
And-
behind some condos.
and-
Oh, okay. So we've got condominiums somewhere along the line.
We have 2 tracking sites that are really, really obstructed by condominiums. Like I said, you pick a spot, you know where the angle is to the pad, and if you sit there long enough, you're going to see it
Yeah,
come over that
yeah.
spot. And then the next part is trimming your tracking mount to the same trajectory, the same speed as the shuttle, and then slowing your track down to track it.
This is the first of our tracking shots. Now, is this remote? Is this a remote tracking shot?
This is, and the reason that you only see half of the orbiter is because on this same tracker we have another film camera that is bore-sighted just below this to see the bottom of the orbiter. The operator is tracking the very center, and one camera is bore-sighting up top and one's bore-sighted down low. That way we get a tighter view, but we get the overall if you look at both film items.
I want to point out, and again, Ken's group is very modest. This is one of the toughest tracking jobs there is. It's short, doesn't last very long, but you're sitting on a console, looking at a monitor, and you're remotely controlling this thing, and it is tough to do. well.
Yeah, because it's a completely different tactile experience looking at a monitor and actually being out in the field looking through a scope.
Absolutely.
It's much less intuitive, I would guess.
It is.
So,
It is.
And you guys have shared the experiences of working inside as well, right? Have you guys worked the remote?
Absolutely.
So, and I'm guessing you would prefer to be on a turret.
One thing with this, I would definitely prefer to be on the mount. I know it doesn't mean anything because he's 3 miles plus away inside a building, but he's actually facing away from the rocket.
Really?
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. I didn't think of that. You're
He's
right.
sitting at a console, but his back is to the launch pad,
Right.
but he can't see it anyway, except for his monitors. One thing about this, we've already met our requirement.
So this is now all icing
Right.
on the cake.
Right.
The pad perimeter tracker's requirement is to 1,200 feet. Once we reach that point, this is all gravy for the engineering community. And the reason that our requirement is met is because now, once it clears the structure, our mid-range have picked it up, which a lot of those get it off the pad anyway. But their requirement is a little bit higher up.
Right.
And then their requirement goes on up, and then the long range pick it up.
Now, Ken, where's this shot from?
This is CS2.
Oh, okay, so this is inside the perimeter.
We have 3 trackers inside the fence. Inside the fence, they're called camera sites, CS. Outside the fence, they're called universal camera sites because we share those sites with metric optics and other
Right,
range assets that anybody could pull up there and plug in. There's multiple power disconnects, there's multiple communication.
It's actually really important to realize that you guys support all the unmanned missions as well.
Correct. We've done historically the Delta, the Atlas, the Titan. We've done an Ares launch. We do the Falcon launches. We've done a lot of Taurus, Athena. We did all the Trident missile launches from not only from land, but we've done Trident missile launches from sea as well.
The Ascent production is all daytime launches, but I wanted to touch a little bit on the differences in tracking between a day launch and a night launch. How hard is it to do? Do you guys wear sunglasses when you're doing this at night?
Absolutely.
And what's the difference with night and day tracking?
Real quick, the guide scope that we use has a series of filter wheels that you can put in place. You can put neutral density, yellow or blue. And it just depends on the operator how they choose to deal with the issue. And it is an issue. You can dial in a little neutral density. Makes it tougher to acquire, and it's a little nerve-wracking. Some people wear sunglasses. Some people squint. Some people kind of look away. It's up to the individual. But you're right, it is an issue.
It's very difficult. First of all, you're out there at night. You're out in the darkness. You don't want any lights on you, around you, because of it affects the cameras. Glare in the lenses. So you're sitting there in complete darkness. Well, your pupils have opened up 100%, and you're standing there, looking through a tracking scope, and your pupils are wide open, and that thing lights off, and you're blinded. You really go from. It's almost like you're looking right straight into the sun. It blinds you to no end. I always wear sunglasses, as dark as sunglasses as I can get. You will be blinded, and once you're blinded, you can't tell where the center of the image is anymore. You're just seeing a spot, and these lenses are so tight, it's critical that you track the exact same thing that you're supposed to be photographing. And when you can't see that, you're lost. The downside to wearing the glasses and the filters and all that, as it gets up and gets away, it's not as bright anymore and you can't hardly see it. So at some point you reach up and you pull your sunglasses off and you just kind of throw them on the ground so that you got to concentrate on what you're doing. It's hard to do at night. It really is.
Anyone who's been in the area during a shuttle launch at night knows that when it launches,
It's daytime.
it turns daytime for a brief, 10, 15 seconds, whatever. One of the first return to flight launches that I worked at night was at Ponce Inlet, which is roughly 35 miles north, something like that.
At least.
Okay. So I can recall, and I'm actually trying to catch the vehicle on the fly about 45 seconds after T0 is when I first see the vehicle. What struck me about it, that far away, it lit up like daylight. It astounded me. I didn't expect it to go that far, but it does. Tracking at night for me is opposed to Kenny's experience is easier. Kenny's close in. He's less than 2 miles away from the pad. I'm, 18 miles away, whatever I am, and I have to catch the vehicle on the fly. So it's more difficult to do that during the day because I can't see it as well. Well, at night, it's super easy because when it lights off, it's right there. I can see it.
You know where it's at on the horizon.
So I kind of breathe a sigh of relief. I don't have to go find it. It's going to come find me. And, so I like night launches for that reason.
And actually, I think it's notable, Ken, that you're one of the few people that's been with the program since the very beginning. You have actually tracked in some capacity every single shuttle launch.
Absolutely. I was on the island of Grand Turk for STS-1, tracking with telemetry antenna, and it was very exciting back then. And to see STS-135, it's still exciting. It's all part of the space program that America's all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. So you were 19 years old doing your first telemetry track, and so here we are 30 years later, and you're still at it. Kenny, why don't you take me through when we hit T-9, and the countdown is now starting as you're preparing to do your job. And
Sure.
tell me how what you're doing mentally and the switches that you're clicking and sort of what you're sensing as you go through all this.
On a typical launch, we're on site 4 hours prior to launch, and through the first 3 hours, it's making sure everything works, reporting back to our controllers that we're 100% operational. We go up and track some high flyers. There's some helicopters that fly around and different things, and just for practice, to make sure we're 100% operational, we do that. Getting down towards 30 minutes, I start checking to make sure my camera settings, which I've checked 25 times before, but I make sure the frame rate is correct. I make sure the shutter speed, shutter degree is open correctly. I'll disconnect the film and do a camera start, make sure it still starts. But again, I've done that 20 times already, but it's just that I want to know again that everything's good. Because we focus these 150-inch telescopes via computer output, that's something I have to start well in advance. I put a 15-second delay, so I got time to start that and get it out of the way. I have a Canon still camera on my mount. I got to start that late in the count, maybe T-1. My film camera has to start at T-6 or 7 seconds. So I'm thinking about all these things I got to start. I got audio recording, I've got focus data, I've got film camera, I've got digital still camera. Oh, and by the way, I still got a track.
Now, when do you physically hop in the seat?
About 4 minutes. There is a critical part in that countdown, and they can go into another hold. So about 4 or 5 minutes, I actually climb into the seat, turn everything on. I know it's working, so I'm ready to go. And then I just start thinking about my sequence, what I have to do. So as the count progresses, I'm looking at the shuttle, everything's perfect, I'm ready to go. And I mentally go through my countdown in my head. At T-minus 15 seconds, I have to reach up and throw this switch. Okay, my next thing is I got to start the camera at T-minus 7. I got a mental count in my head. At T-minus 1 second, I got to go over here and start this digital still camera. And they're all individual switches. This is
Right.
not, I don't have foot switches for this. I don't have a computer starting it. When you're out on a tracker, everything's manual starts. So I've got 3 things to start, and oh, by the way, I have to grab the joystick with both hands and look through the scope at liftoff and track. So
Right.
you forget everything else around you. And when it lights off, it's such a powerful vision, and then the sound waves hit you in the chest like almost like somebody sitting there pounding on you, maybe like an ape pounding his chest. But you start feeling it; it's hitting you. There's nothing that you can imagine that it makes you feel that way. You got this sensation of, wow, there's a launch going on. Wow, there's people on that. Oh my God, you feel it, and
Right,
is everything
right.
working? In my brain, I'm tracking. I'm like, I got it, perfect. I got it. Wow. And then when you get done, 5 minutes later, 6 minutes later after a track, you go in there and the first thing you do is rewind that. I want to see it. How did it do? What did
Yeah.
And so you get that self-gratification. It's like, yes. You walk away with this feeling like, yeah, I did it. I'm really, really happy. You kind of look over at the pad. The pad's on fire. The water's always spraying on the tower, which kind of looks smoky, and you can see, sometimes you can see flames, but typically just smoke. But the feeling is like no other. It really is. There's I'd say the biggest sense of pride after the launch, when you know that you did good. Obviously if you made a mistake, you're not real happy with yourself, but we try not to do that. But there's a big sense of pride that, I did my job, I did what I was asked to do, and I did it good. And so
Each of you as trackers have contingency plans for what you're supposed to do in the event of a malfunction.
the first thing we're tasked to do is see if we're safe. If the rocket blows up and we see a big orange cloud or pieces are coming towards you, you don't do anything else. You vacate the area, you don your PPE, you go to your safety area, or you just get in your vehicle and go as far away as you can. In the case of an anomaly, we have specific orders of what we're supposed to track. Most unmanned rockets, it's grab the biggest piece, grab a piece, lock onto it. For the space shuttle, it's a little bit different because of all the different components. Some track the northern SRB, so some are the southern SRB. Most, I think, are the crew compartment. If you can make out what would be the crew compartment, they want you to track that. My particular site, I'm tasked to track, in case of an anomaly, the return to launch site, where the shuttle would abort the launch and turn around and come back. So I have to be prepared, which I take my launch film off, 1,000-foot film, and I reload another 1,000 foot of film in case of an emergency. And then again, they have a once around abort, which is they'll go around the Earth for 90 minutes, which it takes to do one orbit, and they could come home again.